Welcome back to video 2. So in this video we're going to look at another way that we can master our tracks. Last video we used all of Ableton's built-in effects, so we didn't use any third-party plugins, just everything that comes with Ableton. So I'm pretty sure these come with the... I'd have to have a look, I'm not sure if they come with the light version of Ableton. So if you are on the light version and you don't have access to the suite, you might not have some of these plugins. But if you are on the standard version or the suite version, or I think most of you will be on a trial as well, you should have access to all these plugins. I'm going to show you some third-party ways that we can master our tracks. I do prefer using third-party plugins when it comes to mastering in Ableton. I'm just not a huge fan of the built-in limiter, and the EQ is alright, it gets the job done, but I wouldn't add any resonance with the EQ. I'll just use subtractive EQ like this, so we're just taking frequencies away rather than pushing frequencies up. However, the glue compressor is really powerful and I do love it, and I still use it on my master chain even if I use a third-party plugin to do most of the mastering. The glue compressor is really an excellent tool. I'm going to group all these plugins here, these audio effects that we've got on our original master chain. I'm just going to hide them and turn them off, so we're back to our mixed down track which hasn't been mastered. So the way that you can minimize that is just by showing and hiding with this button here. If you group a bunch of audio effects, you can just use this right here to minimize that so that you don't take up all of your real estate down the bottom here. Now what I'm going to use is a plugin called Ozone. So I'm going to drag this in. So it's made by a company called Isotope, and they create a lot of excellent plugins. As you can see here, I've got some other Isotope stuff. They make some excellent plugins like this RX7. I'm pretty sure they have the RX8 now, which gives you access to denoising, dehumming, declicking. These are really handy if you have a lot of noise or humming in your recordings, whether that be for vocals or you're trying to record instruments or samples. And if you don't have a sound treated room where you're getting a lot of noise in the background, you can use these plugins to alleviate that a little bit. So Isotope also make all these. They make Trash, which is a distortion plugin. They have a bunch of other things, delay filters, and they also make Nectar and Neutron. So Neutron 3 or Neutron is actually a mixing plugin, and it will literally mix for you. So you can come in here and select what instrument or what bus you've got this on. So let's say you throw this onto a drum bus, you can then select drum bus, and then whether it's acoustic or electronic, you can pick that, and then you can, pick the presets here. And you can see as I'm flicking through these presets, it's actually tweaking the EQ curve automatically. So this is a really automated solution. It literally does the work for you. You can see it also adds an exciter, which is basically a saturator, a compressor, and then it also shapes the transients. So it's a really automated solution when it comes to mixing, but I can't say I use it often because I do like to go in and fix the problems, tweak the mix myself rather than letting a plugin do everything for me. But if you are new to mixing and you don't really wish to learn that much about it, or you don't wish to do your own mix downs and you'd rather focus on the creative side, you can use something like this to help you out a bit. Same with Nectar. Nectar is a automated vocal processing plugin. I've only got Elements, so Elements is the bottom or the base version. I think it goes up to Advanced or Professional, can't remember what they call it. Yeah, Advanced. And if you go to, you can select what kind of vibe you're going for, so Vintage, Modern, Dialogue, and then you can select the intensity, and then it will literally process your vocals for you. So you just wait for you to play the audio, and then it'll automatically set the parameters to what it thinks is best for what it's hearing from your project. So if you're after a vocal processing plugin as well, Nectar's another one. But like I said, I don't really use these often. I like to do my own mix downs and my own effects on the vocals and all of my tracks themselves. So I do like to have that control, and I just don't trust a plugin to automatically figure out exactly what I want from the mix down. But if you are new to the process, it can get you, halfway there automatically, and then you can go in and tweak it yourself. But for now, we're going to focus on Ozone. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I understand that a lot of you would not have this. But I'm just going to show you how powerful it is in mastering and why it is sort of classed as one of the leading plugins when it comes to an all-in-one mastering solution. So it's really excellent for beginners as well. So up the top here, you can see we have an EQ. Now I just have the standard version of Ozone. I don't have the advanced, so there are a few more options in the advanced plugin. With the EQ, we can obviously do all the usual EQ stuff. We can cut off frequencies, add frequencies and all that. We can also tweak the mid side, so we can solo the mids here. And then we can also solo the side. So you can hear that the kick and the bass, or the lower of the bass, is missing from the side because we monoed that, which we can hear when we solo the mids. We do still have a little bit of the bass there because remember we didn't mono the entire bass, we just monoed the lower frequencies. So this is really useful that you can, if you wanted to accent the sides, what you can do is add a curve, something like this, where you take away the bottom end, and then you add a little bit of top end on the sides, and then you do the exact opposite for the mids. So you can sort of take a little bit of the top end off the mids, and if you wish, you can just add a very slight boost in. Be careful when you're boosting your lows because that can have quite a big impact on your mix overall. So we can do this with the EQ as well, with our Ableton EQ. If we go to mode, we can go to mid side, and then we can affect the mids. So we can do a similar thing here. Bring down the top end, and then for the side, we can accent those peaks at the top and bring down the lows a little bit. So the reason that I like this curve on the mid and side is just because we're accenting what we're trying to do with that. So we're trying to keep the low frequencies in the center. So like this, on the side channel, I'm actually reducing the low frequencies. And then we want the high frequencies to be out, pushed to the sides. So what we do is reduce that in the mid slightly and push it out to the sides. So that's just another technique that you can use if you wish to do that. With the EQ8, you can. So back to Ozone. We can also tweak left and right independently of each other, and then we can just affect it as a stereo. It's also just a really nice looking EQ. And you can use all of these plugins standalone, as their own separate plugins. So if you just wanted the EQ of Ozone, you can just throw on Ozone onto a track, then you can just get rid of everything else. So I'll just delete that, and now we're just using the EQ. I'll show you a few more tools that come within Ozone. Here we have dynamics. So this is a compressor that's built into Ozone. This is one thing I don't use too often within Ozone, because I like to use my glue compressor on the track overall, like I showed you in the last video. I don't really like to do too much compression in here, but the option is there if you do want it. And as you can see, you can really get into fine detail, and you can actually multi-band compress this. So what I mean by that is that instead of compressing the track as a whole, like the glue compressor, we can actually define frequency ranges in here. Say something like this. And then we can compress all these ranges separately. So if you wanted to just compress the low end, we can click in here and bring this down. Now we can see our compressor working. And now we are only compressing up to wherever we set this to. So we can set it to 150 Hertz. And we are just compressing the low end. We're not actually affecting the rest. You can hear as I push this up and down. Here we're really squashing that low end, so you can barely hear those frequencies. Then we start to get that bass back. So that's the dynamic section of Ozone. It's essentially a multi-band compressor. Again, it's really powerful in that you can compress different frequency ranges. You can do this in Ableton, and I'll show you that in a second as well. So next we have something called the exciter. So this is essentially a saturation or distortion plugin. Again, we can set up our frequency ranges here. So we can set up different saturation for different frequency ranges. So if we really wanted to crunch this bass, I can just crank this up. Let's say I'll leave it like that. The rest is still clear, still the same, but it's only the low end that has distortion on it now. And we can do the same for all the other frequency ranges. If we want to leave the bottom end as is and just add some distortion to the top end, we can do that. And then we got the dry wet here as well. The exciter is really handy as well. It's essentially a saturator where you can actually divide the saturator into frequency ranges, and then you can affect those frequency ranges separately. You can also solo, so you can actually hear what you're doing to that specific range. So the next thing we have is an imager. Now this is what I was talking about when I was mentioning how this had a really good way to see the stereo width of a track. So if I go in and add some frequency ranges here, let's say 0 to 150 Hertz for the low end, then we'll go up to, let's say 500, then we'll go up to about 2.5K, and then we'll leave the rest. So if we look at the low end here, I'm going to solo this. I'll bring this down to 100. You can see that below 100 Hertz, we still have a little bit of stereo width. So if we want to get rid of that, what we can do is just bring down this width to negative 100, and now it's perfectly mono. You can tell by that line there. If I solo some of the top end here, you'll see how wide the sound is. You can see we have frequencies going all over the place, as opposed to the lower end. When I solo this on its own, it's just a straight line, which means it's perfectly centered, it's perfectly mono. So what this allows us to do is to affect different frequency ranges again, but we can actually affect the width. So if we want a less width down here, we can bring this down a bit. The more I bring this down, the more I'm bringing it into mono. If it's negative 100, now it's perfectly mono. Again, if I push it out to the sides, that's adding even more width. And you can see how crazy the frequencies are now that they're pushed all the way out to the sides. So if you find that your track doesn't really have much width up the top, you can use something like this to just push it out to the sides a little bit more. That way you have a little bit of variation up the top end. Same goes for the bottom end. If you find that your frequencies are all over the place, you can clean them up here by just bringing down the width. This is one of my favorite things in Ozone, is the imager. Just gives you a really nice representation of the stereo width. So you've got the left and right here, and then obviously the middle would be the center. So the closer to middle, the more mono it is. And then finally, I'm just going to show you one last thing in here, and that is the maximizer. So this would have to be my favorite part of Ozone. It's Ozone's limiter. So it's essentially like using the limiter in Ableton, except it's way, way, way better. So Ozone's limiter, the maximizer, has a whole bunch of different modes which they've created over the years. They have all their own characteristics. I usually like to use IRC4, which stands for Intelligent Release Control, and this is the latest version they've created. And then Modern is the one that I use the most, as it just seems to work on modern music the best. So again, this is going to depend on the genre that you make. You can go for a more classic limiter or transient, and you can really customize this however you want it. So I'll bring the threshold down here. Let me go to the chorus. So this actually shows us the gain reduction down here, the blue numbers. Let me just loop this section. So we can just watch that number and make sure we're not peaking above the 5 to 6 decibel mark too much. We're also listening out for distortion. But you'll notice even if I absolutely crank this, we're still not getting the crazy distortion that we got by using the limiter. So I can push this one a lot harder and it won't freak out as quickly as the limiter. You can also affect how fast or slow the limiter works. If we want it a little bit more transparent, we can make it a little bit slower or faster. Again, it's going to depend on the type of music that you're making. And then here we have a couple more options to affect the transients. Over on the right here, we can see our volume as well. So we can see the peak RMS volume, which is essentially our true volume. So the closer this is to 0, the louder your track is. You can also set this target down here and click Learn Threshold, and what Ozone will do is actually move this threshold for you so that you reach your target volume. So if I click this now, see how it's just moving that slider up and down. I'm not touching anything. And then if I want this louder, it will then learn where I need it. And it's just moving it automatically for me. Just doing some weird stuff there. But yeah, I don't use this, I just set the threshold myself. But yeah, that's essentially Ozone. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I understand that a lot of you don't actually have it. But if you do go out and you're looking for a mastering solution, this is probably the one I recommend the most. It's really user-friendly as well, as you can see. Has a lot of visual representations, which is nice. So you can see what you're actually doing and how it's affecting the sound. So let's close this. I'm just going to delete this now. Coming back to Ableton, I spoke about how we had multiband compression in Ozone. We have this here in multiband dynamics in Ableton itself. So if I just put this on, actually I'll put this on the entire track. So it's not as pretty as Ozone's compressor, as you can see, but it's essentially the same thing. So here we can set our low frequencies. So this is, the low frequencies will be anything under this number. If I set this to 150, this compressor is going to affect everything below 150. And then we have the high threshold, so this will affect anything above this number. And then the mids will be anything in between these two numbers here. Now this isn't the most user-friendly compressor, I have to admit. It gives you these weird little transparent blocks here, which you can use to affect the thresholds. And if you drag up and down these blocks here, you affect the volumes. So if I drag this up and then drag this block across, and just solo this so you can actually hear what's going on. And I can drag up and down to affect the volume. So now I'm only affecting everything above 2.5 kilohertz. So if we just turn this up and down to hear what's going on, because this compressor is only affecting the top end at the moment, you can hear those really jumping out when we turn up this amount. So we can compress the low end as well, or any frequency range that we want by doing the same thing. Again, I don't find this the most intuitive interface to work with. So like I said, we got the threshold on the left, and then these right bars here are actually the ratio. It can be super confusing to work with. But yeah, it is there if you want to use multiband dynamics. If I was going to use a multiband compressor, I'd probably opt for something like FabFilter Pro MB, or even just using that one inside of Ozone. But one thing that is really nice about this is that we have an option in here. If you have some sounds and you find that you're struggling to get rid of the muddiness, or you just don't have much top end in those sounds, you want to make them a bit clearer and brighter. Let's take these vocal chops for an example. I'll just take this EQ off. We open up multiband dynamics here. We have this thing called OTT. So this is actually one of the biggest staples amongst a lot of producers. If you haven't heard of it already, you will. I'll guarantee you that you will hear it in the coming years, because OTT is just one of those plugins that's so used, or overused even, because it just works so well at doing what it does. I've just thrown on OTT onto this vocal track. I haven't actually touched anything in here. I'm just going to turn it on and off. You can see how it's added a lot of top end. And just some nice saturation to make it really clear sounding. Because it is ducking those mids out a little bit and compressing a little more on the top end, gives us that really clear and slightly saturated sound. So we can also affect the amount here. This can be used on anything, so I'll just show you on vocals. Let's try it on these synths. I'm just going to throw OTT on the group of the synths. And instantly you can hear how it's just brought that out. That's with it off. Put OTT on. And you have some instant spice just from this. So I do use OTT quite a bit. I don't actually use the multiband compressor on its own that much, just because I don't really like the interface and how it works. But the OTT would have to be one of the handiest things when it comes to this. So that's it for this video. I just wanted to show you other ways that we could master a track using third-party plugins. And then I also wanted to show you how OTT works and multiband dynamics works, because I'm sure a lot of you are going to end up using it. I know I use it a lot, and I know a ton of producers, pretty much all producers, use OTT in one way or another. It just seems to be a really easy way to bring out a lot of clarity in sounds and just add that slight amount of saturation by crushing the top end. So I recommend you play around with OTT on a few of your tracks. Just see how it sounds, see how it brings out some energy. Like I said, if your sounds are lacking that oomph and they feel a little bit flat, a little bit muddy maybe, just try OTT, because it is one of the best audio effects when it comes to relieving that kind of a problem. So that does it for video 2. In the next video, we are going to look at some techniques that I use. So just some little tricks and handy things that you can use in your productions. So I'll see you back here for video 3.